My brother abandoned his kids with me, then years later came back accusing me of stealing them and sued me for taking care of them. Before continuing the story, let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you won't miss more stories, and leave your like on the video. So here's how my life completely fell apart. A Tuesday afternoon in March, I'm sitting at my kitchen table working on spreadsheets, 32 years old and living alone in this 3-bedroom house I'd bought with all these optimistic ideas about my future. You know, the kind of house you buy when you think eventually you'll have a partner, kids, a real family. That hadn't happened yet. And honestly, I'd kind of made peace with it. Then my doorbell rang. My brother was standing there with 2 small kids, Melody and Cameron, my niece and nephew. I'd seen them at Christmas, about 4 months earlier. They looked rough then, but now they looked worse. Melody was 5, and her hair was this tangled mess like nobody had brushed it in days. Cameron was 3, holding on to this filthy stuffed rabbit like his life depended on it. "Hey," my brother said, "I need you to take them." I laughed because I thought he was joking. "Take them where?" "Just take them. I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving town for a while." "What do you mean, for a while?" "I'll be back when she turns 18. He nodded at Melody. My brain just stopped working for a second. 13 years. He was talking about 13 years. Are you out of your mind? You can't just abandon your children. I'm not abandoning them, I'm leaving them with family. With you. You work from home. You've got space. You're always saying how you wish you had kids. That's not how this works. What about their mother? She's been gone for 2 years, you know that. What about Mom? What about literally anyone else who has experience with children? Mom will just give me a lecture about responsibility and make everything worse. Look, Fiona, I'm drowning here. I never wanted this life. I need out." He was already backing toward his car. I couldn't process what was happening fast enough to stop him. That's when Melody grabbed my hand and looked up at me. "Are you going to make us leave too?" The way she said it, like she already knew the answer, like she was already braced for another abandonment. It just broke something in me. "No, honey. Come inside." My brother got in his car and drove away. I stood there watching his taillights disappear down the street, holding hands with 2 traumatized kids I barely knew, thinking, what the hell have I just done? The first night was chaos. They didn't have clean clothes. Cameron's diaper rash was so severe he cried when I tried to clean him. Melody refused to sleep with the lights off, full panic mode, hyperventilating when I turned them off. She kept repeating, please don't, in this quiet, desperate way that suggested she'd learned crying loudly got her in trouble. "What happens in the dark?" I asked carefully when I turned the lights back on. "Bad things," was all she'd say. We ended up leaving the bathroom light on, the hallway light, and I found a nightlight that I plugged in by their bed. Even then, Melody didn't settle. She lay there rigid, watching the shadows like they might attack. Cameron curled against her and fell asleep from exhaustion, but she stayed awake, vigilant, like it was her job to keep them both safe. I stayed up until 2 in the morning Googling emergency custody of nibblings and how to take care of traumatized children and can I even do this legally? The internet had a lot of opinions and not many concrete answers. My work laptop sat next to me, emails piling up, and I had this moment of panic thinking, what have I done? I'm a 32-year-old woman who can barely keep houseplants alive. How am I supposed to raise 2 traumatized human beings? But when I checked on them around 3, they were sleeping tangled together. Melody's arm protectively around her little brother even in sleep, and I thought about calling someone to take them away, putting them into a system where they'd be separated and bounced between strangers. I just couldn't do it. They'd already been abandoned twice. Once by their mother when Cameron was a baby, now by their father. I couldn't be the 3rd person to give up on them, so I didn't call anyone that night. That decision, made at 3 in the morning while running on adrenaline and panic, was probably the most impulsive thing I'd ever done in my very careful life. The next morning was chaos. The kids woke up early, Cameron crying, Melody trying to comfort him, and I realized I had no food appropriate for children. Cereal without milk, toast with butter, orange juice. I made a mental list. Milk, cereal, bread, peanut butter, juice boxes, actual kid snacks. Then I tried to work. Had a video call at 9. Cameron screamed the entire time. Melody kept interrupting. I muted myself 6 times. My boss looked concerned. Everything okay? Family emergency. Watching my brother's kids temporarily. How long? I had no answer. After the call, I took them shopping. They'd never been grocery shopping, apparently. Melody asked if she could have everything she pointed at. Cameron had a meltdown in the cereal aisle. An old woman gave me a look. My credit card made alarming noises at the $400 charge, then to a discount store for basics. Clothes, underwear, socks, pajamas, toothbrushes, shampoo, Band-Aids, nightlights, a few toys. Another charge. Then I realized I'd forgotten car seats. Back to the store. Another $200. Week 1 was survival mode. Wake up, feed kids, try to work while they destroyed the living room, lunch, attempted nap time, more interrupted work, dinner, bath battles, bedtime struggles, collapse, repeat. I learned things I'd never needed to know. How to braid hair badly, how to cut food into non-choking pieces, how to convince a 3-year-old to wear pants, how to respond when Melody asked, "Why doesn't Daddy want us anymore?" "Your dad is dealing with grown-up problems that have nothing to do with you," I said. "Some people aren't good at being parents. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. Week 2 brought new challenges. Melody started having nightmares. Cameron started refusing food at meals, then hoarding whatever I gave him. I'd find crackers hidden everywhere. When I tried to explain there would always be food, he looked at me like I was lying. My boss called me in for a video meeting. "We need to talk about your work situation. I know the last 2 weeks have been rough. It's not sustainable. You're missing deadlines. You're distracted on calls. Either you need childcare during work hours, or we need to discuss a reduced schedule." I started working after the kids went to bed. 9 p.m. to midnight most nights, living on coffee and adrenaline. But what choice did I have? The next few weeks were a blur. I tried to maintain my work responsibilities while basically learning childcare from YouTube videos. My boss was understanding about my suddenly chaotic background noise. Crying children, cartoon characters singing, the usual soundtrack of small humans. "Is everything okay at home?" he asked during one of our meetings while Cameron screamed about fruit snacks in the background. "Family emergency," I said. "I'm caring for my brother's kids temporarily." "How temporarily?" I didn't have an answer. I bought clothes, toys, books, furniture. My credit card balance climbed every day. But what else was I supposed to do? The kids needed things, basic things, beds, clothes that fit, food appropriate for children, car seats. I didn't even own car seats. Baby gates, outlet covers, medicine. So many things I'd never thought about. I set up a routine because the internet said children need routine. Breakfast at 7:30. And I learned that feeding children is complicated. They wanted specific things or rejected things or wanted things one day and hated them the next. Cereal was okay Monday but yucky on Tuesday. Pancakes had to be circle-shaped. Juice in the blue cup only. Then educational videos while I worked, which made me feel like a terrible guardian. But the alternative was them destroying my house while I tried to meet deadlines. Lunch at noon. Nap time for Cameron while Melody had quiet time coloring. More work. Dinner at 6. The worst meal because everyone was tired. Bath time, which was still a struggle. Stories before bed. Then Melody's lengthy bedtime ritual. Checking for monsters. Positioning the nightlight exactly right. Getting water, bathroom, more water, and finally sleep around 9:30. It sounds organized, but it was held together with duct tape and me crying in the bathroom during Cameron's naps. Over the next 2 weeks, the truth came out. Melody told me they'd gone to bed hungry sometimes because their dad forgot groceries. Cameron hoarded food. I found crackers in his pillowcase, cookies behind toys. The apartment had bugs. Their dad's band practiced late and they had to stay quiet or he'd get mad. Then one morning, Melody said, "Daddy forgot to feed us sometimes." I stopped mid-pour with the orange juice. "What do you mean?" He'd be doing music stuff and forget it was dinner time. Sometimes we went to bed hungry. I tried to make sandwiches, but I couldn't reach the counter good. She said it so casually, like this was normal. I wanted to throw up. Sometimes the apartment was really messy, she continued. Daddy said cleaning was boring. There were bugs sometimes, big ones. Cameron cried when he saw them, but Daddy got mad when we made noise. Each revelation was a punch to the gut. Mommy left when I was really little and never came back. Daddy said she didn't want us anymore. Is that why he left us too? Because we're not good kids? No, I said fiercely, kneeling down. No, honey, you're wonderful kids. This isn't your fault. Adults are supposed to take care of children. Your dad made bad choices. That's not about you. But I could see she didn't believe me. Why would she? Every adult she'd trusted had either left or failed her. I was working full-time while trying to care for 2 traumatized kids. My boss was understanding at first, but I could hear the frustration. I bought clothes, toys, child-proofed the house. My credit card balance exploded. Week 3. Cameron got sick. Fever of 103 degrees. I panicked and took both kids to the pediatrician. The doctor was in his 50s, professional and thorough. He examined Cameron first. Flu, treatable, not an emergency. But then he wanted to check Melody too. When was her last wellness visit? I don't know. I'm their aunt. Their father left them with me 3 weeks ago. His expression changed. Left them? Can you elaborate? So I explained. The doorstep abandonment. The 3 weeks I'd waited. Everything. He weighed them both, measured them, checked their teeth, their eyes, their ears, asked questions I couldn't answer about medical history, previous doctors, vaccination records. Ms. Harper, I need to be direct with you. These children show clear signs of chronic neglect. They're both significantly underweight for their ages. Their vaccination records are years out of date. They're missing critical immunizations against diseases like measles, mumps, whooping cough. This young man has untreated diaper rash consistent with long-term inadequate hygiene care. Your niece has 3 cavities that should have been addressed months ago. I know. That's why they're with me now. I'm trying to help them. I understand that, and I can see you're making efforts. But I'm legally mandated to report suspected abuse or neglect to Child Protective Services. Even if the children are currently in your care, the state needs to be involved. My stomach dropped to my feet. But I'm helping them. I'm keeping them safe. I know you are. But you don't have legal custody, correct? No, but then their father could return tomorrow and remove them, and you'd have no legal right to prevent it. The state needs to document this situation and ensure these children's safety going forward. I'm sorry, but I have to make this call. He called CPS right there in his office while I sat there holding Cameron, watching my world fall apart. He gave me a business card with a case number written on it. Someone will contact you within 48 hours. Be honest with them. Document everything. Take photos if you haven't already. This isn't about punishing you, it's about protecting these children. I drove home in silence. Melody asked if they were in trouble. I said no, but I wasn't sure if that was true anymore. The social worker showed up 3 days later, right on schedule. Her name was Patricia Chen, and she had a clipboard, a professional demeanor, and the power to take these kids away from me. She spent 2 hours at my house, inspecting every room, opening my refrigerator to check for appropriate food, examining the kids' bedroom setup, watching how the children interacted with me, asking 1,000 questions about everything. How long have you been close with your niece and nephew? I saw them occasionally, family gatherings, holidays, and you had no idea about the neglect? I suspected things weren't great, but I didn't know it was this bad. My brother kept his distance from the family. Why did you wait 3 weeks to report the situation? I was trying to keep them safe. I didn't want them thrown into the system immediately when they were already traumatized. She made notes. Lots of notes. Finally, she sat down at my kitchen table. The kids were watching cartoons in the living room, far enough away not to hear, but close enough that Melody kept glancing over to make sure I was still there. Here's the situation, Ms. Harper. Your brother still has legal custody of these children. If he shows up tomorrow and demands them back, you would have to hand them over. You cannot legally prevent him from taking his own children. He doesn't want them. He abandoned them. Abandonment is a legal term that requires documentation and established timeframes. Right now, from the state's perspective, he could claim he asked you for temporary help, and you agreed. It's your word against his about what was said during that transfer. So what do? You need to file for emergency custody. That requires a lawyer. He'll either have to voluntarily terminate his parental rights, which is unlikely, or you'll have to prove in court that he's an unfit parent. Either way, it's expensive, it's time-consuming, and it's not guaranteed. How much time are we talking about? If everything goes smoothly, 3 to 6 months minimum. If he fights it, which he probably will, it could take a year or more. And during that time? During that time, we need to evaluate whether you're an appropriate placement for these children. You're working full-time, you have no childcare experience, you've never raised children. The fact that you waited 3 weeks to report this situation is concerning from our perspective. I was trying to protect them. I understand. But from our perspective, you're an unknown. We need to assess your home, your finances, your support system, your ability to provide long-term care. I'll be conducting follow-up visits. I need to see progress, legal representation, concrete childcare plans, evidence that you can sustain this arrangement long-term. She stood up, gathering her things. I'll be back in 2 weeks. Ms. Harper, make those 2 weeks count. After she left, I sat on my kitchen floor and cried. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I was barely keeping my head above water financially after 3 weeks of emergency spending, and I had no idea what I was doing. But those kids needed someone. They needed me. That's when I thought of Jenna. I called my brother's ex-girlfriend, Jenna. She'd lived with him and the kids for a year before leaving about 8 months ago. We'd stayed in casual touch after their breakup. Occasional texts, checking in, that sort of thing. When I explained what had happened, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Can we meet in person?" she finally asked. "There are things I need to tell you." We met at a coffee shop 2 days later, halfway between our cities. She looked healthier than I remembered from the last time I'd seen her at a family gathering. Less exhausted, more color in her face, like someone who was finally getting enough sleep and eating regular meals. "Thank you for coming," I said as she sat down. "Of course. When you told me what he did, God, Fiona. I knew he was a bad father, but I didn't think he'd actually abandon them completely. How bad was it when you were there?" She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "Bad, really bad. I was working 50, sometimes 60 hours a week at my job while he pursued his music career full-time. Not working at all, just practicing with his band and going to open mic nights and spending money we didn't have on equipment. I paid every bill. Rent, utilities, groceries, car insurance, everything. And I took care of his 2 kids on top of my full-time job. Why did you stay? I loved those kids. I know they weren't mine biologically, but I loved them like they were. Melody called me Mama Jenna. Cameron's first real word was my name, not his father's. I was the one getting them dressed in the morning, making their meals, putting them to bed at night. Your brother was absent, even when he was physically there." She took a breath. "I was pregnant when I left. I hadn't expected that." "What?" "About 3.5 months along. We hadn't told anyone yet. I was still trying to figure out how I felt about it. Honestly, adding a 3rd child to the chaos when I was already drowning seemed impossible." "What happened?" "I miscarried at 15 weeks. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly. The stress, the exhaustion, the weight of carrying everything alone. My doctor said my body was shutting down. She told me I needed to leave that situation immediately for my own health, both physical and mental. So I did. I'm so sorry, Jenna. I felt so guilty about leaving those kids. They weren't mine, but I'd been more of a parent to them than your brother ever was. But I was dying in that apartment. My therapist, my doctor, my own parents, everyone said I needed to save myself, that I couldn't set myself on fire to keep other people warm." She looked up at me. "But here's the thing. When I left, my parents offered to help me fight for custody. They knew how bad things were. They'd watched me deteriorate over that year. They'd seen how your brother treated those kids, but I had no legal standing. I wasn't married to him, wasn't an adoptive parent, just someone who'd lived with them. I had 0 rights in court. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying you do have legal standing. You're their aunt, blood relation. If you're going to fight for custody, my parents want to help. They'll pay for a lawyer, a good one." "Why would they do that? They don't even know me." "Because they loved those kids too. For a year, they were grandma and grandpa. They came to Melody's kindergarten graduation. They taught Cameron to count. They bought Christmas presents and birthday gifts. They felt terrible since I had to leave. Knowing those children were still in that situation, this is their chance to actually do something, to help someone who's fighting for them. I wanted to refuse. I'm independent. I don't take handouts. I solve my own problems. But pride doesn't keep children fed and housed and safe." "Okay," I said. "Thank you, really." Jenna's parents hired a family law attorney named Mr. Fitzgerald. He was in his 60s, expensive, and experienced. His office had that polished professional look that screamed, "This will cost you a fortune." But Jenna's parents were paying, and I was grateful. At our first meeting, he laid out the reality. "Best case scenario, you file for emergency custody this week. Your brother has to respond within 30 days. We go to court within 60 days. If he doesn't show up, or if he voluntarily agrees to termination of his rights, we could have this wrapped up in 3 to 4 months. And worst case, he fights it. His mother gets involved and supports him. We end up in a prolonged custody battle that drags on for a year or more. Family court moves slowly, and judges are cautious about permanently removing children from biological parents. What do you think will happen?" He looked at me seriously. "Honestly, I think he'll fight. Men like your brother, narcissistic, unable to accept responsibility. They don't like admitting they're bad fathers. They like control. Even if he doesn't actually want the kids, he'll fight you taking them because it makes him look bad. Be prepared for this to get very ugly." He wasn't wrong. We filed for emergency custody in week 5, exactly 2 weeks after Patricia Chen's visit. My brother was served with papers at his new address. an apartment about 2 hours away, where he'd apparently moved in with his girlfriend. Yeah, he had a girlfriend the whole time he had his kids. That detail made me want to scream. He hired a lawyer within days, an aggressive one who charged by the hour and clearly believed his client's version of events. The preliminary hearing was in week 8, held in a fluorescent-lit courtroom that smelled like floor wax and broken families. My brother looked good, like he'd actually made an effort. Clean clothes, fresh haircut, the practiced expression of a concerned father. His girlfriend sat directly behind him, looking supportive and pretty, in a way that made me irrationally angry. His mother, my mother, though it was hard to remember that in the moment, sat on his side of the courtroom. She hadn't called me once in the 8 weeks since he'd abandoned his kids on my doorstep, but here she was, supporting her son. His lawyer was good, really good. He painted a picture. My brother had been going through a severe mental health crisis. Depression, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed by single parenthood. He'd asked me, his sister, his family, to temporarily care for the kids while he got professional help and stabilized his life. It was supposed to be a few weeks, maybe a month, but I'd taken advantage of the situation, filed for permanent custody while he was vulnerable, made false accusations of neglect and abandonment because, and this part made me see red, I'd always been jealous of him. Ms. Harper has never had children of her own, his lawyer said smoothly. She lives alone in a large house. She's expressed to family members over the years her desire for children. When her brother, in a moment of crisis, asked for temporary help, she saw an opportunity to take his children permanently under the guise of protecting them. It was complete fiction, but he sold it well. Then came the witnesses. Friends from his music scene, guys with band t-shirts and practiced sincerity, testified about his dedication to his craft, his good character, his struggles as a single father trying to balance art and parenthood. Poor guy, just going through a rough patch. Anyone would understand. He just needed some support, some time, not to have his children stolen by an overzealous sister. Then my mother took the stand, and that's when it really hurt. She cried. Actually cried on the witness stand, talking about her son's struggles, how hard it had been for him after the children's mother left, how he'd been doing his best under impossible circumstances. She said I'd always had a difficult relationship with my brother, that I'd been jealous of him since childhood. He was the creative one, the free spirit, while I was the rigid rule follower who'd never understood him. She painted me as vindictive, someone who would use his moment of weakness against him. She never once mentioned the neglect, the malnutrition, the missing vaccinations, the bugs in the apartment, none of it. Mr. Fitzgerald did his best with our evidence. He presented the medical reports showing chronic neglect, the pediatrician's documentation of their underweight status, the missing vaccinations, the untreated diaper rash, the dental problems. He showed photos of the conditions the kids had arrived in, the filthy clothes, the inadequate belongings. He had my testimony about what the children had told me, the food hoarding, the fear behaviors, all of it. But my brother's lawyer was ready for all of it. He suggested the medical issues could have developed in the 3 weeks they'd been with me. Maybe I wasn't feeding them enough? The photos showed normal kids' clothes that had gotten dirty through regular play. The children's statements were coached or misinterpreted by someone with no childcare experience who didn't understand normal kid behavior. The judge listened to everything, took notes, asked questions, and then she made a decision that felt like a knife to the chest. I'm ordering a full evaluation before making any permanent custody determination. Based on the conflicting narratives presented today and the seriousness of the allegations, I believe a thorough, neutral assessment is necessary. Your Honor, Mr. Fitzgerald stood. My client has been providing appropriate care for these children for 8 weeks. They're stable, they're safe, Your client, the judge interrupted, has no legal custody and waited 3 weeks before reporting the situation to authorities. The father claims this was a voluntary, temporary arrangement that has been mischaracterized. I need clarity. Therefore, the children will be placed in neutral foster care while all parties undergo psychological assessment and home studies. My heart stopped. Your Honor, please, this is not a punishment. Ms. Harper, this is about determining the best interest of the children. The evaluation period will be 60 days. During that time, both you and your brother will have supervised visitation. At the end of 60 days, we'll reconvene with the results of the evaluations and make a determination about permanent placement. I watched them take my kids out of the courtroom. Melody was crying, reaching for me. Aunt Fiona, don't let them take me. You promised. I had promised. I'd promised her I wouldn't leave her, and now she was being taken away by strangers in a courtroom while I stood there helpless. Cameron didn't cry. He just went blank, this empty look on his face like he'd learned that crying and screaming don't help, that adults do what they want regardless. That look was somehow worse than Melody's tears. A foster care worker held their hands, professional, kind, but a stranger, and led them away. The last thing I saw was Melody looking back at me over her shoulder, betrayal and fear written all over her 5-year-old face. I made it to the parking lot before I started sobbing. The next 60 days were hell. I was allowed supervised visits twice a week for 2 hours each. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, 5 to 7, at the DCFS office in a room that smelled like industrial cleaner and had toys nobody wanted to touch. Supervised. Like I was the danger. A caseworker sat in the corner with a clipboard, watching every interaction, taking notes. Did the children seem comfortable? Did they initiate affection? Did the aunt respond appropriately? Everything documented, evaluated, turned into data points. The foster parents brought them to the first visit. Tom and Lisa, in their 50s, experienced foster parents with 2 other foster kids living with them. Professional, kind, patient, everything foster parents should be. But they weren't me. "When can we come home?" Melody asked within 5 minutes. "Soon, honey." "But when? You said we could stay with you." "You said you wouldn't make us leave." Her voice cracked. "You promised." What do you say to that? How do you explain family court to a 5-year-old who's already been abandoned twice? "I'm fighting for you," I said. "I'm doing everything I can to bring you home, but it's going to take a little while longer." "How long?" "About 8 more weeks." "That's forever," she whispered. And to a 5-year-old it was. Cameron barely talked during that first visit. He sat next to Melody, holding her hand, staring at nothing. When I tried to engage him, showed him a toy car I'd brought, asked about his day, he just looked at me with empty eyes and didn't respond. "He's not talking much," Lisa told me quietly. "At our house either. He's having nightmares every night, waking up screaming, and he started having accidents again. Regression, trauma response. All the clinical terms for a 3-year-old's heartbreaking." After that first visit, I sat in my car for an hour before I could drive home. Then I went home to my too-quiet house and cried. The visits became routine, twice a week, every week, for 8 weeks. I watched them slowly withdraw. Melody stopped asking when she could come home after the 3rd visit. Not because she didn't want to know, but because asking hurt too much when the answer was always soon, and soon never came. Cameron stopped making eye contact around week 4. Just sat there with his rabbit, staring at the floor. The foster parents said he'd stopped eating much, stopped playing, spent most of his time alone, watching the same cartoon on repeat. "Is this hurting them more than helping?" I asked Patricia Chen after week 5. "The evaluation process is necessary to determine the best placement," she said. "Professional, clinical, unhelpful." "That's not what I asked. Are we traumatizing them further?" She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Meanwhile, I underwent my own evaluation. The psychological assessment involved 3 appointments with Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a court-appointed psychologist. Each session was 2 hours of questions designed to find cracks in my story. "Tell me about your childhood," she said in the first session. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Parenting patterns often reflect our own experiences. I need to understand your background." So I told her. Middle-class family, 2 kids, me and my brother, parents who loved us but clearly favored him, the creative one, the free spirit. I was the responsible one, the boring one, the one who followed rules. Growing up feeling like I had to earn love through achievement while he got it just for existing. "Do you think that contributes to your desire to take your brother's children?" "What do you mean?" "You've spent your life feeling second best to your brother. Now you have an opportunity to prove you're the better person, to finally be chosen over him. Is that part of this?" The question made me angry. But she wasn't entirely wrong. Maybe partly. But mostly it's that those kids need someone, and I'm capable of being that someone. Are you? You're 32, single, no children of your own, working full-time? What makes you think you can handle 2 traumatized children? I've been doing it for 8 weeks. Under crisis conditions. That's different from long-term parenting. Crisis mode runs on adrenaline. Long-term parenting runs on sustainability. Do you have that? I didn't have a good answer. The second session was harder. She asked about my relationships, my dating history, my social life. "You've been single for 3 years. Why?" "I haven't met the right person." "Or you've been waiting for something to give your life meaning." "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" You live alone in a large house. You work from home, minimal social interaction. Your friends have families, lives separate from yours. And now suddenly you have children. Instant family. Is that what this is really about? No. This is about two kids who were abandoned and neglected. That's what they need. What do you need, Fiona? And there it was. The question I'd been avoiding. I'd been lonely. God, I'd been so lonely. Living in that big house by myself. Watching my friends have babies and family dinners while I microwaved meals for one. I'd told myself I was happy, independent, successful. But the truth was simpler. I'd been waiting for my life to start, and it never had. When my brother left those kids, part of me had seen it as an answer. Purpose. Family. A reason to matter. I was lonely, I admitted finally. I wanted purpose. I wanted to matter to someone. And when he left them, part of me saw it as something I needed as much as they needed me. That's honest, Dr. Martinez said. But you need to understand something critical. These children are not therapy for your loneliness. They are not a solution to your life problems. They are two traumatized human beings with complex needs that will take years, potentially decades, of intensive support to address. They will test you. They will push you away. They will have meltdowns and nightmares. They will make your life infinitely harder. Can you actually handle that? I have to. No. I have to suggest obligation. That's not what these kids need. They need someone who chooses them actively, continuously, even when it's hard. Can you actually do that? I sat with that question. Really sat with it. If I took these kids permanently, my life would change completely. Career advancement, gone. I was already part-time, already behind, already off the partnership track. That would only get worse. Relationships, dating, essentially impossible. Who wants to take on two traumatized kids? Financial security? Gone. I'd be living paycheck to paycheck for years. Freedom? Gone. Every decision would factor in two other human beings first. My entire life would revolve around these children. Yes, I said finally, I can do this. Not because I have to, because I choose to. Because those kids deserve someone who chooses them, and I'm that person. Then prove it, she said. Real concrete changes, so I did. I negotiated with my boss, 30 hours a week at 60% salary. I researched trauma therapists. I converted my home office into a proper kids' room with bunk beds, toy storage, nightlights. I fixed every safety issue Margaret the home inspector had flagged. I proved I was serious. Meanwhile, my brother's evaluation showed narcissism and inability to prioritize his children. His one-bedroom apartment had no space for kids. He was broke. Then, a few weeks before the final hearing, everything changed. Jenna's parents had quietly hired a private investigator weeks earlier. They hadn't told me because they didn't want to get my hopes up if nothing came of it. The investigator showed up at Mr. Fitzgerald's office with a file at least 2 inches thick. I think you'll want to see this, he said. What he'd found was explosive. My brother had significant gambling debts. Not just a little money, approximately $40,000 owed to various bookmakers and online gambling sites. That's why he'd actually left town. He wasn't running from responsibility to his kids. He was running from collection threats. People he owed money to were looking for him, making threats, and he'd needed to disappear fast. The kids would have made him easy to track, so he dumped them and ran. Can you prove all of this, Mr. Fitzgerald asked. The investigator laid out photos, bank records, documented threats from creditors, printouts of online gambling accounts. It was all there. But that wasn't even the worst part. The investigator had documentation showing my brother had been collecting government benefits for the children the entire time they'd been in my care. Food stamps, child support assistance, emergency family benefits, all money designated for children living with him. He'd been submitting forged documentation claiming they were still in his care while they were actually with me. He'd been committing fraud for months, using that money for his debts and his equipment. There's more, the investigator said. I tracked down the children's biological mother. He opened another section of the file. Everyone was told she voluntarily abandoned the children 2 years ago. That's not the whole story. I found her in a court-mandated rehab facility. When I interviewed her, she said your brother told her that if she ever came back, he'd have her arrested for child abandonment and make sure she never saw her kids again. He threatened her, scared her away intentionally. Why would he do that? Because a single father gets more in government assistance than a 2-parent household? He wanted her gone so he could maximize his benefits. He was using those children as a source of income while providing them with minimal care. I felt sick. This was so much bigger than just neglect. My brother had been systematically exploiting his own children for financial gain. Mr. Fitzgerald looked at the file with an expression I couldn't read. This changes everything. We present this at the final hearing. With documentation this thorough, the judge can't ignore it. The final hearing was scheduled for week 16. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Melody's face during our last visit, how she'd stopped asking when she could come home, how the light had gone out of her eyes. 8 weeks in foster care had changed her, changed both of them. And if this hearing didn't go our way, they might be there even longer. The courtroom was the same fluorescent-lit space that smelled like floor wax. My brother showed up looking worse than last time. More tired, more stressed. His girlfriend wasn't with him this time. Apparently she'd left when the truth about his debts came out. His lawyer looked less confident. My mother was there again. When our eyes met, she looked away. Mr. Fitzgerald presented the investigators' findings methodically. First, the gambling debts. Photos of betting slips, bank statements showing losses, documented threats from bookmakers. Your Honor, the respondent's abandonment of his children wasn't about mental health or being overwhelmed. It was about fleeing debts to dangerous people. He used his sister as a convenient dumping ground while he ran. My brother's lawyer tried to object, but Mr. Fitzgerald continued. Second, benefit fraud. He presented the documentation showing continued claims while the children were in my care. The respondent has been collecting approximately $1,200 monthly in benefits for children who haven't lived with him in almost 4 months. That's fraud, Your Honor. He's been using his own children as income sources. Then came the evidence about the biological mother, the investigator's interview notes, her statement about the threats my brother had made. The respondent deliberately drove away the children's mother, not because she was unfit, but because her absence allowed him to claim higher benefits. He engineered this situation for financial gain. The courtroom was silent. My brother's lawyer did his best, talked about rehabilitation, about how people make mistakes when desperate, about second chances. But you can't spin away documented fraud. Then my mother did something I didn't expect. During the recess, she approached Mr. Fitzgerald. Her face was ashen, aged years in the weeks since the first hearing. I need to speak, she said quietly. When the hearing resumed, she asked to address the court. Your Honor, I need to withdraw my support for my son's custody claim. Her voice shook. I testified at the preliminary hearing that my daughter was being vindictive, that my son loved his children and was just going through a difficult time. I was wrong. She looked at me finally. I didn't want to see the truth. He's my son, and I made excuses for him. But hearing this evidence today, I can't ignore it anymore. Those children were neglected under his care. He used them, and I enabled it by refusing to see it. She turned back to the judge. I'm requesting supervised visitation with my grandchildren if the court allows it, but I'm not supporting my son anymore. My daughter should have custody. I'd never heard my mother admit she was wrong about anything. It didn't fix years of favoritism, but it was something. The judge took a 15-minute recess to review all the evidence. Those 15 minutes felt like hours. When she returned, her expression was serious. Based on the evidence presented, I am terminating the father's parental rights due to abandonment, ongoing neglect, and financial exploitation of his children. The documented fraud and the deliberate isolation of the children from their biological mother demonstrate a pattern of using these children as tools, rather than caring for them as a parent should. She looked at me. I am granting permanent legal custody to the aunt, Ms. Fiona Harper, with the stipulation that the children continue therapy and that the arrangement be reviewed annually for the first 3 years. I couldn't breathe. After 4.5 months, it was over. The children will be returned to Ms. Harper's care immediately following this hearing. Supervised visitation for the paternal grandmother is granted, pending her completion of a parenting course focused on recognizing and reporting child neglect. My brother stood up, started to say something, but his lawyer pulled him back down. He looked at me across the courtroom with this expression. Not anger, not remorse, just emptiness. Like he'd already moved on. He left immediately after the ruling. Didn't try to see the kids one last time, didn't apologize, just walked out. I got them back that afternoon. Week 18. 18 weeks after my brother had abandoned them on my doorstep. They'd changed. Melody was quieter, more clingy. Cameron had regressed significantly. Accidents, nightmares, barely talking. Tom and Lisa, the foster parents, handed them over gently. They're good kids, Lisa said. They just need time. I sent them a thank you card later. They'd done their best in an impossible situation. The first night back in my house, Melody wouldn't let me out of her sight. She followed me from room to room, even waited outside the bathroom door. At bedtime, she asked 3 times if I was sure they could stay. "You're not going anywhere," I told her. "This is your home now, forever. You said that before, and then they took us away." That was the court. "That's over now. Nobody can take you away anymore. I promise." She looked at me with those 2 old eyes. "You promised before." "I know, and I'm promising again. You're mine now. Legally, officially, permanently. I'm not letting anyone take you away." It took weeks for her to believe it. Months. Really. Even now, 2 years later, she still panics sometimes when routines change. My brother left town after the ruling. Within a week, according to family gossip, he'd moved to California, still dodging his gambling debts, still running. I heard through the grapevine months later that he was still alive out there, still moving around, still owing money. Not my problem anymore. The people he owed money to were probably still looking for him somewhere on the West Coast. He never tried to contact us, never called, never sent a letter or an email, just disappeared completely from his children's lives like they'd never existed. I changed my phone number anyway. Installed security cameras on my front and back doors. Paranoia, maybe. But after everything, I needed to know we were safe. The cameras never caught anything suspicious. He was truly gone. Problem solved itself in the end. The biological mother was a different story. She completed her court-mandated rehab program about 6 months after the custody ruling. 4 months later, she reached out through Mr. Fitzgerald asking if she could see the kids. "What do you think?" I asked him. "Legally, she has no rights. The judge terminated them along with your brother's based on the pattern of abandonment and your brother's threats against her. You have sole discretion here, but I'd advise caution. She needs to prove sustained sobriety for at least 2 years before I'd even consider it." "Can she prove that?" He pulled up her file. "She's been out of rehab for 4 months. She's living in a halfway house. She's working part-time at a grocery store. She's attending NA meetings. But 4 months isn't 2 years. People relapse. If you let her into the children's lives and she disappears again, that's another abandonment they'd have to process. So I should say no. I'm saying protect your kids first. If she's serious about recovery, she'll understand that she needs to prove it over time. If she's not serious, this will go away on its own." I drafted a response through Mr. Fitzgerald. The children were healing from significant trauma. Introducing a biological parent who'd been absent from their lives for years would be destabilizing. If she maintained verified sobriety for 2 years and engaged in family therapy to understand the impact of her absence, we could revisit the conversation. She wrote back once saying she understood, then nothing. 6 months later, Mr. Fitzgerald heard through court contacts that she'd relapsed and was back in rehab. The door stayed closed. Maybe someday, if she gets clean and stays clean, we'll revisit it, but not now. Not when the kids are finally stable. 1 year after that Tuesday when my doorbell rang, we'd settled into something resembling normal life. The kids were in school, Melody in 1st grade, Cameron in pre-K. Both were in therapy twice a week with Dr. Sarah Chen, a child psychologist who specialized in trauma and attachment disorders. Melody's separation anxiety had improved but wasn't gone. She still needed to know where I was at all times. She still panicked if I was late picking her up from school, but she was learning to manage it. Dr. Chen taught her coping strategies, counting breaths, using a feelings chart, carrying a photo of us in her backpack. Small tools that helped. Cameron was slowly catching up on his developmental delays. Speech therapy 3 times a week had helped him expand his vocabulary and form more complex sentences. He was still quieter than most kids his age, still more comfortable with adults than other children, but he was talking. That was progress. They both still had nightmares sometimes. Melody would wake up screaming about people taking her away. Cameron would have crying fits where he couldn't explain what was wrong, just sob for 20 minutes while I held him. But the nightmares were less frequent now, maybe once or twice a month instead of every night. Jenna moved to a town about an hour away and visits twice a month like clockwork. The kids adore her. They call her Aunt Jenna and run to hug her when she arrives. She brings crafts and games and does art projects with them for hours. She's been consistent, reliable, present. Everything a good aunt should be. Her parents, who I've met several times now and who continue to be absurdly generous, set up education funds for both kids. College money, trade school money, whatever they need when they're older. They also created a monthly support fund that contributes $1,500 toward the kids' expenses. Therapy, activities, emergencies. That money is the difference between barely scraping by and actually being okay financially. I tried to thank them properly once. Jenna's father just shook his head. "We loved those kids when Jenna was with your brother. We felt helpless when she had to leave. This is our chance to actually help. You're doing the hard work. This is the least we can do." My mother visits once a month, usually on Sunday afternoons. She brings gifts. Too many gifts, like she's trying to buy forgiveness. She completed the parenting course the court required, and now she sees what she missed before. Or claims to. Anyway, the first few visits were awkward. The kids barely knew her, and she didn't know how to connect with them. But she's been consistent for over a year now. She reads to them, plays board games, takes them to the park. She's trying. One Sunday, after the kids went to play in the backyard, she said to me, "I owe you an apology. A real one. Okay. I chose wrong. I chose him over you, over those children, because it was easier to believe his lies than face the truth about who he'd become. You were right. You were right about everything. And I'm sorry. It wasn't enough to undo years of favoritism. Wasn't enough to fix our relationship completely, but it was something. And for the kids' sake, I accepted it. Just keep showing up," I told her. That's what they need now. Consistency. She's kept her word. Every month, without fail, she's there. As for me, the reality check came hard and fast. I'm broke most months. The combination of part-time salary, massive childcare costs, therapy bills, and just the general expense of raising 2 growing children means my bank account hovers near zero. The monthly support from Jenna's parents keeps us afloat, but there's no cushion, no savings, no emergency fund. One major expense. Car breaks down, roof leaks, medical emergency, and we'd be in real trouble. I gave up any chance at career advancement by going part-time. I'm 33 now. My colleagues who started when I did are senior associates. Some are making partner. I'm still doing basic client work, billing 30 hours a week, going nowhere. My boss is understanding, but there's only so far you can go when you're not available for evening meetings, can't travel, and leave early twice a week for therapy appointments. Dating? Forget it. I haven't been on a date in over a year. I tried once, about 6 months after I got the kids back. Set up a profile on an app, matched with a guy who seemed nice, agreed to meet for coffee. "So tell me about yourself," he said. "I'm an accountant. I work part-time. I'm raising my niece and nephew." "Oh, how old are they?" 5 and 3. "And you have them full-time?" "Yeah, I have permanent custody." He made it through the coffee but never called again. I deleted the app after that. What man wants to sign up for instant family with 2 traumatized kids? Nobody, that's who. I'll probably be alone forever. And I've made my peace with that. My social life evaporated. Friends stopped inviting me places after I had to cancel plans 5 times in a row because of kid emergencies. They don't understand why I can't just get a babysitter and come out for drinks. They don't get that I can't afford babysitters, that Melody has separation anxiety, that leaving them with strangers undoes weeks of progress. Eventually, people stop asking. I'm tired all the time. Bone-deep tired that never really goes away. Even on good days when the kids are happy and everything goes smoothly, I collapse into bed at 9 and could sleep for 12 hours if they'd let me. The weight of being the only adult responsible for 2 tiny humans never lifts. Every decision is mine. Every problem is mine to solve. Every middle-of-the-night crisis is mine to handle. But here's what I gained. 2 kids who call me Aunt Fiona and run to hug me when I pick them up from school. Cameron draws me pictures every day. Strange, beautiful drawings that we put on the refrigerator. Melody helps me cook dinner, standing on a stool at the counter, carefully measuring ingredients while narrating every step like she's hosting her own cooking show. We have family movie nights on Fridays. We make blanket forts in the living room on rainy Saturdays. We go to the park on Sunday mornings, and Melody pushes Cameron on the swings until they're both dizzy with laughter. Last week, Melody came home from school with a drawing she'd made. It was our house. 3 stick figures holding hands in front of a blue rectangle with a red triangle on top. "That's you, that's me, that's Cameron," she said, pointing to each figure. "That's our family. Our family. Not temporary arrangement. Not aunt who's taking care of us. Family." Cameron still doesn't talk about his dad. Won't even say the word daddy. But a few months ago, he climbed into my lap during a thunderstorm. He's scared of loud noises, and said, "I'm glad I live with you." "Yeah? Yeah. You don't forget to feed us. And you don't get mad when I'm scared." The bar was so low it was underground, but I'd cleared it. And somehow that felt like everything. Would I do it all again knowing how hard it would be? That's the question everyone asks. My therapist asks it. Dr. Martinez asked it during the evaluation. Even Jenna asked it once. Here's the truth. Yeah, I would. Not because I'm some kind of saint or because it's been easy or because everything worked out perfectly. I would do it again because when I saw those kids on my doorstep, Terrified and neglected and already abandoned twice, I couldn't walk away. I couldn't be another adult who gave up on them. 2 years later, we're still figuring things out. The kids are 7 and 5 now, which feels impossible. How did so much time pass? Melody wants to be a veterinarian. She's obsessed with animals, watches nature documentaries with an intensity that's honestly a little unsettling. She can identify 47 different bird species and knows more about marine biology than I learned in 4 years of college. She's already planning her future career, talking about which colleges have good veterinary programs. She's 7. Cameron is still quieter than most kids, still processes emotions differently than his sister. But he's found his thing: art. He draws constantly. At home, at school, during therapy sessions. Dr. Chen says it's his way of processing emotions he can't articulate verbally. The pictures are strange and beautiful: swirling colors, abstract shapes, occasionally recognizable objects. Last month, his pre-K teacher submitted one of his drawings to a local children's art show. It won 3rd place. We framed it and hung it in his room. They have friends now. Real friends. Melody has playdates with a girl named Sophie from her class. They're inseparable, constantly giggling about secrets and drawing pictures for each other. Cameron has a friend named Marcus who comes over sometimes, and they build elaborate block towers in complete silence for hours, creating these intricate structures that look like modern art installations. It's their own language, their own way of connecting. Normal kid things that felt impossible a year ago. They still have hard days. Days when Melody's anxiety spikes out of nowhere and she can't go to school, convinced something terrible will happen if she leaves me. Days when Cameron has complete meltdowns over small changes to routine. We moved his toothbrush to a different drawer and he sobbed for 45 minutes. Days when they fight with each other over nothing, testing boundaries, pushing me away to see if I'll abandon them too when they're difficult. But they're healing. Slowly, imperfectly, messily, but healing. Dr. Chen says they're making remarkable progress considering what they've been through. Melody can now go a full week without a nightmare. Cameron is starting to trust that food will always be available. They both understand that when I leave for work or errands, I'm coming back. Small victories that feel enormous. As for whether it was all worth it, I don't spend much time on that question anymore. Worth it compared to what? Compared to the life I thought I wanted: career success, eventual marriage, biological children of my own, financial security, freedom to travel and make spontaneous decisions? By those measures, no. I gave up all of that. I'll never make partner. I'll probably never get married. I'll never have biological children. I'll never have savings or retire comfortably or take European vacations or do any of the things I thought my life would include. But compared to a life where I'd said no that Tuesday afternoon, where I'd let those kids go into the system and told myself it wasn't my problem, compared to living with that decision, knowing I'd walked away when they needed someone most, compared to the version of me who chose the easier path, yeah, this was worth it. Every exhausting, financially devastating, socially isolating moment of it. Those kids needed someone, and I was there. I'm still here, and I'll keep being here, through the hard days and the therapy appointments and the nightmares and the tantrums and the teenage years that'll probably be even worse. Through all of it. Because that's what family does. Not the family you're born with. Clearly that failed these kids spectacularly. But the family you choose, the family you build, the family you fight for when everything and everyone says you should walk away. 2 years ago, my doorbell rang and changed my life forever. I didn't know what I was signing up for. I was naive and unprepared and probably a little delusional about how hard it would be. But I'd do it again. Every time. Because those kids deserved someone who'd choose them. And I did. I do. And these days, that's enough. That